Max Orr, Melbourne Football Club. You're listening to the Coaches Panel.
This is Nat Fyfe from the Fremantle Footy Club.
Trent Cotchin from the Richmond Footy Club.
Scott Pendlebury from the Collingwood Football Club. You're listening to the Coaches Panel.
Patrick Cooch from the Carlton Footy Club.
It's Rory Sloane here from the Adelaide Crows.
This is Tom Mitchell. You're listening to the Coaches Panel.
It's pretty rare you can say that a player has been a premium in our sides for the better part of a decade, and yet enter that new season and still say they should do it yet again. But since 2015, as a defender, Rory Laird has been putting up premium level numbers for us and across our backlines, and most recently through the midfield has been one of the most consistent 100, 110, gosh, even 120 plus seasonal average performance. But in 2024, is he heading back to the heights of 2022? Or is regression coming as the Crows' ascension seems to be on the way? We are talking about Rory Laird today. He is number 4 in my 50 most relevant. We are well and truly at the pointy end of this list. It's a conversation about who I think are the most relevant players, that ultimately it's a subjective list, but designed to start a conversation about important players that we must consider in 2024. And joining me on this podcast is fellow co-founder Rids. Mate, there has been no greater premium for us over these past few years that I think has graced our side across multiple lines. Yeah, wow. Rory is just, what an incredible player and a fascinating prospect as we look to 2024.
Oh, mate, and let's not beat around the bush, yeah? SuperCoach, is great and everything else, but this is really a discussion about AF and DT today. And I know that your top 50 is across all the formats.
Yes.
So I just wanted to make sure everyone is aware that today's discussion isn't going to be really significant for SuperCoach.
Oh, way to make them not more tune in, mate. Come on.
Oh, well, I still want just to tune in because it is still, like, Laird's great. And SuperCoach, he's just built for SuperCoach, isn't he?
Yeah,
and we're going to talk a lot of stats in the next, 20 minutes, 30 minutes. If I ramble a lot, 40 minutes. And that's all relevant for SuperCoach, yeah? Because it's contested ball footy, it's contested, it's efficiency of the ball going out, it's hard ball gets, everything else that goes through it. But we are really going to drill down massively on AF/DT in this discussion.
A heap of stuff we want to get to because it's a bit easier to extract elements of data from that. But as you mentioned, SuperCoaches, we're going to talk a lot about stoppage points, transition points, how did this Crows midfield shakes up? And really, the big question I think everybody's considering about Rory Laird, what's he going to do at the start of the year and at his price point? Is there a little bit of fat on the bone that it's worth starting him? Is he just going to hold his baseline that we're paying for? Is regression on the horizon? Those are the 3 really big caveats we've got to put over Rory's conversation for 2024. But just looking back the clock in 2023 for us, a seasonal average of 116.8 in SuperCoach, a top score of 156 and 17 tons means he's coming in at a price point of $653,100, while he's got a career high score of 185 in that format. He's just a touch over the $1 million mark in Dream Team and 14,000 off it in AFL Fantasy due to a seasonal average of a 109.2. 17 tons also in that format, a top score of the year of 142, and 163 is a career high score. Rids top 5 in the league in a bunch of different key indicators for us. Handballs, center clearances and tackles, top 10 in the league for disposals, contested possessions, and effective disposals. Ever since he's moved into this Crows midfield midway through 2020, he's just been one of the best premium options for us because, as you mentioned, wins the ball in tight at stoppage, has no problem linking up through those transition elements of the game, just does it all, tackles, wins the footy, gets involved in all the score chains of the Crows. We'll look into this 2023 data in a bit more detail, but if you do kind of build the perfect fantasy player, Rory Laird kind of ticks all those boxes for us.
He's been an absolute superstar. So let's not undersell this. This guy came on as a rookie pretty much from the Crows list. And then he's come in and he's not only become an All-Australian half-back, he's gone into the midfield and absolutely, he just racks up the ball. He's just a ball magnet. But there's going to be some elements we're going to discuss. But the thing is, no matter what you do, all we're doing is throwing things out there.
Yep.
Make up your own mind. Have a gut feel on this, okay, as you go through. But there's going to be a lot of stats. So don't turn off. Keep listening. There's a fair chance, and I'll give you a reason why you want to keep listening. There's a fair chance I'm going to stuff up probably 80% of the stats I'm trying to talk about. But let's see how I go, yeah?
I'm looking forward to that. Well, of those 17 tons he got last year in AFL Fantasy, 7 were over 120, 4 over 130, and that season high score of 142. Just the one score under 80. That was that round one score of 57. We'll talk about that in a second. But still, despite that going against him, getting subbed out of a game with injury precaution, he still finishes 11th in AFL Fantasy for average and for total points. So if you're down year, puts you as the 11th best player. Okay, I think I can kind of deal with that. While in SuperCoach, of those 17 tons from that seasonal average of 116.8, better conversion rate of hundreds to 120s, 10 over 120, 4 over 140, 2 monsters over the 150 plus marker. And again, that round one score of 50, just the only score under 80. He ranks 7th in SuperCoach for total points, 5th amongst midfielders, and he's also in that top handful for averages across that year. Let's talk about that round one game. It's his lowest AFL fantasy score since 2015 and his lowest SuperCoach score since 2014. Is it as simple to say, Rids, that round one score in that 30-plus degree heat GWS up in Sydney, is that just an anomaly, or is that being too generous towards Rory?
No, I think he even said it himself on the Traders pod the other day. He pretty much said he was heavily affected by the heat. Of course, GWS applied some tactical accountability to him around the stoppage. And there's no wonder why. This guy is a stoppage beast. But I'll just throw this at you, okay, mate? We're talking about he's ranked number 1, okay, for stoppage points per game for 2023 for the Crows. Yeah, in that game, he's 6th, mate. Out of 70% CBAs, he only he was 5.8% of the points of stoppage points for the Crows was Rory Laird's. That's just ridiculous, yeah.
That's so it's half what he normally does, yeah.
Yeah, it's just ridiculous, like across the board. Because you think about it, we've always thinking about CBAs. 70% CBAs in that time frame. That's quite okay. Like that's just not Rory Laird. There's elements to it. Whether it's an outlier, whether it's not, make up your own mind for that. But don't forget, he pops back round 2 and scores 140 odd, in AFL Fantasy.
Season high possession rate, goes 140 in SuperCoach as well. So it clearly didn't impact him too much beyond that. It wasn't like, I know the narrative there was, do I trade, do I hold, is he cooked for the coming week? Well, he showed really, really quickly that, no, he's not cooked at all.
And the other thing that I want to highlight just now is, I've done it myself, Radio. I've gone dry weather football, the ball's bouncing around. I've said it plenty of times. Laird still averaged 60 points per game, stoppage points per game, over the first 6 to 8 rounds last year. So that's when the weather is dry. He actually has good history, as you said before, of being able to get out and find those transition points as well as the stoppage. So I think that pretty much says to us, okay, yeah, that's probably a fallacy. That's probably just a make-believe thing, and we're probably heavily influenced on that round 1 game that we're talking about due to the heat.
We know over the past couple of years, he's averaged over 8 tackles per game over the past 2 seasons. But I'm pretty sure in 2022, he broke records in terms of how many tackles he got, not just in a match, but over the season, was top 5, as I mentioned earlier in the episode, in this area. So we do sometimes have this confirmation bias where we go, he's great at tackles. The game slows down as the weather gets worse. Therefore, I'll start looking at Laird as an upgrade option because of that. But as you mentioned, no. It's not as simple as that. But we did see a little bit of regression in a few elements for Rory Laird last year. If we take the anomaly that not only Rory himself, but as you mentioned, statistically gives us that confidence, we're not just extracting a data point to suit a narrative, but rather we're suiting it to give us confidence for what is a truer baseline. We did see a few things really fall away. His overall fantasy and SuperCoach numbers did see a bit of a cliff in comparison to what was a really high level in what he did in 2022. But he still dropped 4 possessions per game, while the other key metrics kind of held. But what you've done, guys like Jaden Popowski have done in the preseason, have really given us a greater level of understanding of data and where these data points are coming. So talk to me about 2023 Rory Laird and 2022 Rory Laird, that stoppage point element that you've mentioned. Where did that change come? And did we see a change for Rory Laird from where he got his stoppage points in 2022 to 2023?
Okay, so in 2022, Laird averaged 67 stoppage points a game. Okay, he averaged 120 across the course. So that's 55%. Okay, so 65% of his points for a game is stoppage points. I hope that makes sense. Did that make sense, MJ?
Yeah. So you're 10 seconds in, but you're going okay.
Okay. Now, last year, just to relate this, he had 63 stoppage points on average a game, but his average was 109.2 for the season. That equates to 57.69% of his overall score.
This is AFL Fantasy and Dream Team scoring, but there are parallels for SuperCoach.
Yes, correct. And that's why I was saying it's going to be very heavy focus on that, but there is a bit of takeaways from it. Mm-hmm. Okay. I just want to relate this, okay? So 63 on average a game. That's massive, MJ. I'm going to explain to you just how massive this is. Please. The top 5 stoppage points average per game players across the whole league last year. Bontempelli at number 1 at 66. Taranto at number 2 at 65 average. Laird is 3rd. Yeah, wow. Okay, at 62.4. Sarong is 4th at 62, and Libba's 59.3 rounds out the top 5. Now, I reached out to Jaden. I've just got to give Jaden a shout out here, okay? If you haven't followed Jaden, rightio, I recommend you do. I've got no chance of saying his surname properly, but I'm going to try it anyway for a bit of humour, okay, for the stats. Jaden Popowski, absolute. He's been everywhere, okay, the last couple of weeks. He's on every pod. He's everywhere. I know Vams has reached out to him multiple times. I definitely have. The guy is just so accommodating. I actually reached out 5 minutes before we started this recording and asked him a couple of other questions, and then he's responding back to me straight away because he knew I was doing this pod. Yeah. But he came back with the greatest stat. Now, I just want to go back to it. 67 average stoppage points a game in 2022. 63 an average stoppage points for 2023. Jaden just told me there was 1 in 18 players who have gone 55 or more stoppage points on average a game have not regressed the next year. That means 17 out of 18, MJ, not just random. They get less the year after. And we saw that already with Laird from 2022 to 2023. So that's the first thing, okay? I then wanted to come back, and then what I did was we've talked about market share.
Yes.
We've talked about market share plenty. So there's a gentleman out there in this world of fantasy called Rowan. He's been great enough to join forces with DFS Australia, with Mort, and he's got actual market share information on DFS Australia. If you don't actually follow it or don't know of it, go out and have a look, because this is really important. This is about the players' percentage, their market share percentage of the team points per game. It's brilliant, okay? It's absolutely brilliant because it gives you a bit more understanding. So if you had the stoppage points discussion that we just had and you had the market share, you could probably relate the two and actually come up with more. And just don't forget either, MJ, it was only 3 or 4 years ago, we only had CBA data.
The guys at the Draft Doctors initiated the data analytics point, and it's now just expounding further and further in the community, which for us in the fantasy community is super helpful understanding the game.
Now, I just want to highlight the market share, okay?
Please.
Laird's market share percentage last year was ranked number 1 for the Crows over the last 8 games, okay? And that was at 7.01, which is I think it was 5 of those games because he missed the round 19
round
match
19 when Crouch came back
when
into
Crouch
the
came
side.
back.
Yeah.
So he averaged 114 over those last 5 games with Crouch in the side. So he's averaged 5 points more a game?
Yeah, it's about 5 points per game more in AFL fantasy based on what his price point is, and about 3 points per game over his price point based on what he did in SuperCoach over the entirety of the year.
So that's 7.02% of market share over that time when Crouch was in the team. He was also ranked number 1 for Crows with the market share percentage per time on ground over 2023. Now, that's significant to me, okay, because Laird isn't a young man anymore. There is potential that time on ground does come down a little bit.
This episode is brought to you by Allstate. Some people just know they could save hundreds on car insurance by checking Allstate first. Like, to check you have the tickets in your wallet first before you drive 2 hours to the big game. Seriously, you had one job. Now the closest you'll get to the 50-yard line is parking lot D. Yeah, checking first is smart. So check Allstate first for a quote that could save you hundreds. You're in good hands with Allstate. Savings vary. Terms apply. Allstate Fire and Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Northbrook, Illinois.
Whether that means anything or not, we don't know because he can actually get the ball. He's a ball magnet, as I said at the start, yeah? So that might mean he's a fresher.
Let alone in the mids, yeah.
He's a fresher guy. His points per minutes go up a little bit. That's perfect. But what Rowan called out to me, which I have to give him a huge shout out as well, was the significant upsizing or increase in team average points that the Crows had. So under Nick's 2022, the Crows averaged 1448 points per game.
AF, yep.
Not SuperCoach. This is all about DT and AF, radio. 2021 is 1445. 2022, it went up to 1470. Last year is the significant thing. It jumped to 1576. That's an increase of 105.6 points a game, mate, for the team. Well, I'll tell you how significant it is. That's the second highest by any team over the past 6 years. That's how significant it is.
Massive.
So depending on all of this information, that's where the market share comes in. So 7% of that average points per game
that jumped up.
Laird's.
And does that correlate because the Crows improved overall those 3 seasons prior of 2020, 21, 2022? They were a basket case, certainly in 2020, and the rebuild of 2021 and 2022. So that doesn't shock me that they improved that statistical area. Now, that big of a jump, absolutely, we need to take note. But that's where I think coaches are looking at that. And it's interesting, isn't it? We can look at data and see both sides of a coin and feel justified, whether it's confirmation bias or not. I think people need to ultimately be a bit honest around. But you could look at that data jump and go, yeah, Crows got better. Of course they got better with this fantasy points. Or go, hang on a sec, this market share might not be sustainable as the Crows get better because of that element.
Well, I think it's a bit of both, yeah. And I mean, it's subjective to the play, like the coach. However you see this, it could be, you know what, the team's just getting better. They hold onto the ball a lot more. They control the ball a lot more. There's more points on offer per game because they're just naturally better. And you think about it, mate, you're a Crows man. You got Rankin, you got Rich Shelley, you got a few really good players that came into this team. Michael Lenny in the back line.
Yeah, Dawson, you throw him in the mix. Yeah, Pedler.
Yeah, like Dawson into the midfield, 100%. Crouch is potentially coming back as a full-time capacity. Again, that's all neither here or there.
Yes.
Yeah, well, this is the whole idea of it. You use the stats and then you go and frank the stats and watch the games and actually see what the outcome drives you to see. So that's why it's just important to understand. Now, Laird could very well be the one out of the 18 players this year that actually moves his stoppage points up. And his market share might actually go higher. But for his market share to actually become higher, the team points either come down, which will then push his average up, or it goes up again with the team points. Otherwise you need a lot more. 1576 is a reasonably big-ish average team points. Like,
it's pretty significant. You talk about Matt Crouch. In the final 5 games of last year, he does go on an average of a 114 in AFL Fantasy and an average of 119.4 in SuperCoach. So it's about 3, 4, 5 points per game of upside based on what he did in the season overarching, in contrast to that. But we've got to come back to this start of year of Matt Crouch. And because I think there's this conversation which has often been misled by the tackle tactic, but the data does give some narrative to it. If you look at what Laird has done in the first 6 games of the past 3 seasons, I've kind of thrown 2020 out because he wasn't a pure midfielder for the whole year, but also all the variances of shortened quarters, the weighting in SuperCoach, the shortened games, and the ADPA, BCVs, whatever the multiplication of letters and numbers was. I just don't care for it. Here's what he did in his first 6 games of the past 3 years across the formats, what he did from round 7 onwards, and then the contrast point to what he was priced at or what he delivered for us that year. In 2021 in AFL Fantasy, first 6 games, a 105.1. The rest of the year goes at a 114. He's priced at for us with a total season average of 111. In 2022, a 109.6 over the first 6 games of the year, 124 over the back half of the year, and he's at a 120.3 at a seasonal average. Then last year, including that 50-odd score across the format, 100.6 in the first 6 games, a 112 across the rest of the year, and a seasonal price point of 109. Remembering, Crouch in the side, he goes at 114 in AFL Fantasy. For SuperCoach, this is what he does over this past 3 years. First 6 games, a 104 average, 120.5 from round 7 onwards, and a seasonal average of 116. 2022, 119. He goes over those first 6 games, a 131 over the remaining part of the year, and a seasonal average of 127. While just last year in 2023, again, including the unicorn once in a career score, a 111 SuperCoach average in the first 6 games, a 118.8 in SuperCoach from that point onwards to the rest of the year, meaning a seasonal average of a 116.8. And that 5 games of Matt Crouch, a 119.4. So I think, Rids, it's this interesting point for us with Rory Laird is statistically, we would look at the first 6 games of the year and go, Laird's never gets to the heights of what he does for the season beyond. But we look at the price point he's at now, throw the Matt Crouch elements in there, and we're not paying up for the 120 odd that we did the year prior. That's where I do think some in the community are still going, I still feel like with Laird, if I'm going to pay up for a premium midfielder, he feels like the safest of the lot, that even if I do see a little dip, I'm probably not paying for it as much as I might have over the previous 2 seasons.
And you did brilliant there, MJ, because you know that I had a bit of an internet issue. That's why I dropped out mid-sentence just before. And you covered that beautifully and through. You vomited a lot of stats out there in one breath. That was amazing by you. I just want to call out, the Crows were the 4th highest on team points on average, okay, last year. And they're 1576. So they are very high already. Now, back to your question. What does that mean for Laird? I actually think it's not the dry weather. We've actually gone and we're going to break it down. I don't think it's the fact that, hey, I'm a stoppage player. When it's dry weather, the ball's bouncing around more. I get more tackles. I get more stoppage points. I get more contested. I don't think that's the case. I just think it's actually Laird's fitness and the endurance that the beast has that actually makes him just as effective when he's getting tired and people around him are getting tired as the season prolongs. So that's what I believe it is. I don't have any stats to back that up, but I just wanted to throw out there because I have, and I'm guilty of it. Yeah. I have thrown that, that out there, that dry weather versus Laird. I actually don't think that's the case. I think the game slows down and that helps the Laird style, yes. But that's where his endurance and his fitness comes in because he is a beast.
Without question.
But, okay, with all those stats, and I sort of lost interest halfway through, sort of didn't hear half of it. There was a lot of stats, okay? You know what it does tell me?
Yeah.
You've missed Matt Crouch in your top 50, mate, this year.
I still don't know if he's best 22.
And that's fair. That's why this is a subjective and objective list. Yeah.
Correct. Yeah.
But right now, let's just say
Let's assume he's in.
Yeah, you've had a shocker, yeah. But that's all right. We miss. You know what? You do enough for the community.
I'm allowed one bad day. Okay. Good
well, it's been one bad day in the last decade, so you're doing all right. Okay.
All right, I'll take that.
So, anyways, if you're going to ask a question and it's directed at me, maybe shorten. Less is more, mate. Don't throw all these, because I lose interest. There's a red car that drives by, whatever else, I get lost, okay? So, yeah. So what was your question? What do you want me to answer for you?
My question is this. With the last 5 games of data of Crouch, and then what he did at the back 7, from round 7 on to the end of the year, basing though the trend of the last 5 and the 3 years of what he's done, he's actually priced at a space where I think coaches can feel that he doesn't just hold what we're going to pay for him, but there's a potential for some upside. Might not be much, but I think coaches could feel validated in that. Again, basing it on what he's priced at, what he did with Crouch, and what he does historically over the totality of a year. My question is this.
My stats just told you, okay, this is a guy that scores 55% to 60% on stoppage points. Radio. That's not going up. Like there's 1 in 18 that regress from 55 or more, okay, stoppage points on average a game. Straight away, that's 1. Number 2, the total team points is 1576. Okay, that's 4th in the league, MJ. I don't believe that's got much scope for improvement either. Laird's already got 7% roughly on average on through that period you were just talking about. I just don't think it's going to continue. I think it's more likely for people to expect, hey, look, he's priced at 110 in AF and Dream Team. Great. Perfect. Don't go expecting 120. Those days are probably gone because totally Adelaide's much better as a team and Laird is not as required to fill the gaps to be a better team, if that makes sense, because there's a lot more around him. It's a Dawson. And it's not just Crouch, but he's part of it. Yeah, he's part of the parcel. It might be that some games of football, they need to inject some speed into that midfield.
Yeah, it's Pedler, Rankin, Rochelle. Absolutely.
They're the guys, okay? Saligo, all of these, they're still going to have to find the next Rory Laird because Laird's not young anymore. I'm not saying he's old in the tooth and he's past it and I'm going to retire him. What I'm saying is they still need to give the young guys that, because I believe Adelaide, and I think Louis said it the other day on one of the pods, I can't remember which pod, Adelaide's an outside chance here for a top 4 team. They're past the rebuild stage. They're actually in the, here we are, we're coming. Like you think about Carlton a few years ago, we're coming, okay? If Adelaide don't play finals this year, they're going to be very, very disappointed. I just don't see the upside on any of that. Well, Laird and Crows outside of the ladder and their performances as a team.
Ryan Reynolds here for, I guess, my 100th Mint commercial. No, don't. I mean, honestly, when I started this, I thought I only have to do like 4 of these. I mean, it's unlimited premium wireless for $15 a month. How are there still people paying 2 or 3 times that much? I'm sorry, I shouldn't be victim blaming here. Give it a try at mintmobile.com/save. Whenever you're ready.
$45 upfront payment equivalent to $15 per month. New customers on first 3-month plan only. Taxes and fees extra. Speed slower above 40 gigabytes. See details.
Yep. I think that's the beauty of Laird, is if you want him and you don't start him, if he becomes drops that $50,000 in AFL fantasy, $80,000 or $30,000 to $50,000 in SuperCoach, I can see a lot of people within the community, Rids, wanting to trade into him. If, as you've said, they just find a narrative reason for, no, I'm not going to start him, which again, absolutely perfectly fine for you to do. It becomes really hard to then be able to prioritize him over some others, because I think a lot of people get the value in our teams in the first 6-7 weeks, absolutely no problem. But here's what happens as we enter into round 7. All the buys are done up until round 12. So we've now got this clear airspace of 2 months where we can pretty much know that barring injury or suspension, everyone's available. We're about to enter in an allocation of DPP. So we'll see who's picking up defensive and forward status that are going to become a prioritization for us. If we've gone the value ruck approach, whether it be a Grundy or a Cherry, we're now thinking of ways, when and how do we get into a Marshall, an English, or is Gawn going to stay and be one of those top end guys? Maybe you've faded a Dacos because you're worried about the buys and potential tag points. And then there's those premium mids that you'd probably really consider had they not had some early buys. And one of those guys, for example, is a Tom Green or a potentially peak priced Marcus Bontempelli that you're thinking you'll get some value. I've just listed 10 different scenarios that are all coming to you at this logjam approach of round 7. And Rory Laird feels like a weird priority in the mix of that. And all of a sudden, if you don't address him or other priorities there, he'll get to the point into the year where you almost can't pick him.
And I think that's right. And I think there's other elements. I think you've absolutely nailed that, mate, because often at times we go, you know what, we're just going to base this on something that really suits the narrative we want to get through. Okay. But the fact of the matter is, yeah, I've just spent the last 20 minutes telling you why he's likely to regress.
Sure.
But guess what? Let's look at the flip side now. Why should you own him? You know what? You've just said it beautifully. Who do you prioritize over a Laird or a Dacos or the other non-starters, whether it's a Bontempelli? You had that beautiful discussion with Kane the other day about how do you prioritize the upgrades, you know? Like, that's in itself. How do we match that to when the fixture opens up? Sometimes, and you know this from years ago, yeah? Sometimes it's just easier to start these guys and then just to work with what you can. Because I want to highlight another thing, okay, which is really, really important. Now, we've mentioned Jaden quite a bit over the course of this episode and the year, and everyone mentions Jaden now. He's a rock star, okay? But on his website, he's got this worthwhile averages. And what he's done is he's actually weighted it from the starting price of how high you are in that list as a keeper for the year. And I said the K word, yeah, the rotten K word. But there it is. It's a premium that you keep for the whole year. That's the intention behind it. Whether that happens or not, who cares? But the thing is, Laird's worthwhile average is 113.1. for this year in AF and Dream Team, okay? That's very much in the realms of possibility for Laird.
Without question.
And let's look at market share. That's a market share of 7.17. And we already know he's done 7.02. And that's if Adelaide maintained that 15, 76 team points and average a game. But that's where I'm sort of saying. None of this is unrealistic, is it?
No, no, it's a very easy world.
You also have a captain option, MJ.
Week in, week out.
Week in, week out. but don't expect him. This is what I'm sort of saying. Don't expect him to go jump into those 120s again in this heyday. He might do it over a smaller stretch, a smaller sample size. I think it's unlikely myself, but I mean, if you're big on him, none of these stats should scare you off, because this is why he's relevant, yeah? This is, what number is he, 4?
Number 4, yeah. He is, of all our premium pure midfielders, I've got him at the top.
Mate, if he was an absolute lay-down misère, he would be probably a little bit lower. You do think about Young discussion that you had with Monk the other day, okay? Absolute lay-down misère. He's an absolute no-brainer in defence. He weighs 7, 6 in the list. This is probably where we find Laird. But the problem is, and I said it the other day to you, whether he sucks or whether he pops, he is relevant no matter what. And this guy is relevant everywhere. And we're trying to pick these arguments apart as we go through.
Yeah.
The thing is, the AF, and again, this is why I want to start. I said it wasn't SuperCoach, because SuperCoach has got that 3-3-0-0 dynamic and everything else associated. This is why it's heavily weighted to AF, because what do we hear at the start of every single preseason? Value. That's all we hear is value. You need to get a guy that's going to outshoot his price tag. You know, whether it's 10 points, 15 points, whether it was like what we said the other day with Zach Williams, 30 points, it doesn't matter, but that's what your goal should be for the majority. But there is a captaincy option. There is a draw that is a variable. There is, who do we prioritize? I mean, you came up with this crazy saying a couple of days ago, prioritization organization, I think you said in one of these.
Allocation, but I'll go with the organization.
Yeah, but the thing is, okay, we're making up terms now as we go. I've made up terms all for the last 20 years, yeah? So we might as well just make it up as we go along. But the fact of the matter is, what you get as an output needs to heavily favor or outplay the risk associated with the price tag, if that makes sense. Laird does not have that risk unless he has an outlier game like last year of round 1. That's what's evident, okay? And whether you don't believe it's possible or whether you do, it doesn't matter. That's what's going to happen. He only dropped a certain 50, 100 grand, whatever it was.
It was
if that's all it takes, though.
If that, yeah.
And you go, I can buy into him at round 4 or round 6. But guess what? We talked about it with Zach Merritt the other day. And I haven't heard whether Dacos is actually in the 50 yet or not. But
he's
I'm
not yet been revealed.
Oh, he's not there yet. We're at number 4, aren't we? So what a surprise. He's going to maybe be a conversation in the next 3.
He's on the podium, mate.
Yeah, rightio. Well, there you go. There's cat out of the bag, yeah.
Well, he's in the top 3.
But guess what they all have? Round 15, mate. Round 15 buy.
Hugely helpful for us. We look at a Laird as we come towards the end of the episode and talk about drafts. If you choose not to start him because you're like, I want to see Ridzes unpack this stoppage and transition points and total points and market share, you know what? I want to see a little bit and then I'll make an upgrade decision. He's relevant because if you're right that it does have that impact point, you're getting a guy who's got absolute ceiling potential at a real nice price point and you've done well. Equally, if you start him and he holds that pathway, it's relevant because now you've arguably overpaid for the output of what you're getting. Conversely, you look at that captaincy option where he plays every game right through to that round 15 buy. And for those 14 weeks, he is a vice captaincy and captaincy option for you every single week. You put that Matt Crouch scoring stat over the price point. You look at what he's priced at versus what you think could be a really easy pathway to at least hold. Now you talk yourself into starting him. A player's relevance isn't linked to they're a great scorer or a crappy scorer. It's linked to the impact they're going to have on
yeah,
your
but
season.
MJ, when we talked about coming up with a name for this series, I don't know how long ago, 8 years ago, 9 years ago,
like
we wanted it to be ambiguous because really it's about the discussion of the player,
of course,
not where they're ranked in the list. So that's the whole point. Well, it is for you because you spend, not for me, I don't really care, yeah? Because I'm going to talk about these guys no matter what. So you're the boss. You go, hey, Rids, I need you over here. Let's have a talk about this guy. I go, yeah, rightio. And then I go message JP or Rowan on Twitter and I say, hey, but boys, can you get me this stat? I don't do anything, mate, rightio. And then all I do is try not to stuff up the delivery of what I'm actually trying to explain. That's me. But we did this on purpose. We wanted an ambiguous title, relevant. And you know the best thing about the word relevant, whether you own them, whether you don't, it is all relevant, yeah?
Yeah, absolutely.
And you just nailed it. Otherwise, it would be the top 50 slam dunk picks of 2024 or the top 50 top scorers or biggest recessors or whatever we want to do. But that's why this series is so brilliant, mate.
Thanks, mate. Well, as we talk drafts quickly before we wrap up this episode, based on what I think people are expecting and based certainly on what he's done historically for us, he's likely to be an M1 for us. Some will draft him as one of their first couple of mids off the board with some excitement. Others will pick a couple. It's pretty safe to say, Rids, when you get through to the turn on the midway through the second round of a draft, Rory Laird's off your board no matter what.
Yeah, he's an M1, mate. There's 2 Crows at M1 this year. You just got a plan that you're going to have to get them. Now, it's going to be draft to draft, and we've spoken about this over the course of the journey, yeah? But really, there's 4 clear guys that I think is going to come really early, and they're all in the rucks. I think there's 4, okay? And I think Dacos has got to be in that conversation, whether it's a Bontempelli. But I tell you what, I wouldn't mind choosing a Rory Laird or a Dawson or something in contrast to a Bontempelli if I didn't have a pick to take one of the other guys.
Yeah, you're getting that at the back to middle portion of that first round, early into the second. Like, you're right. I'd feel pretty comfortable about that. Mate, as always, an absolute pleasure. You've given us a bunch of stuff to consider around the fantasy relevance about Rory Laird. Thanks for jumping yet again on another episode, mate.
And just remember, I did ramble, so I went over 40 minutes or whatever I did do, but we didn't talk about Jordan Dawson. We didn't talk about tags. There's a whole heap of other stuff. So if you want to reach out, tag us, and I'm sure I'll be able to reply, okay? And, I mean, we're going to be a little bit more accessible this year for AF and so on and so forth anyway. So, yeah, just reach out anytime.
If you want to go back and check out any of the other players, we've done an episode on the 50 most relevant so far, whether it be the audio podcast or where you've been watching this on YouTube. You can get in touch with us through those elements. Just subscribe to the audio podcast wherever you get your podcast from and leave a 5-star rating, or jump over to YouTube, subscribe, and make sure the notification bell is turned on. So as soon as an episode goes live, you'll get notified straight away. There's new content landing there every single day, even after we finish up the 50 most relevant. And if you do want to get in touch with us across social media, or you want to support us through the work of our Patreon and get bonus additional content, all the details for those things you can find in the description of this episode. All right, 3 players left to go. You know the names, but do you know the order? There's one who's potentially the top of his tree, the other who's a value guy that's been at the top of a tree, and then one that's pushed towards the top of the scoring tree and is priced with a potential bit of value. 2 of them, in fact, all 3 of them, as good as a prospect they are, do have an early buy. But how early is the buy round coming for the player in at number 3? You'll find out tomorrow in the 50 most relevant.